What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of 10x Recruiting, brought to you by MetaView. Sile, it's good to see you, man.
Good to see you too. Hello.
Hello. All right. So today we talked to Annie Wenzel, who is a senior partner at Swing Search. Sile, what were your takeaways?
Annie's a good friend of mine, good industry friend. So was pumped to have her on the pod. Biggest takeaways for me were, I think there's like two, and I put them into like a sort of a master takeaway really, which is basically comes down to, I think there's a lot that non-exec recruiters can learn from great exec recruiters, which I think is like obvious to many people, but I still think maybe there's a couple of like particular things that I mean in that regard. One is I've got really hot at the moment on how we're represented in the markets, especially to executives, but actually in all, like every hire we're making at MetaView is frankly key. It's a key hire. And so like how we're represented and understanding if we are using external recruiters, like do they actually show up as like someone I'm proud to have connected to the company is really important. And I love Annie's way of making sure that she can get close enough to the company to be able to do that authentically. And then the second is she is very much like a partner for someone who's doing the hiring, but still, frankly, understand it's a service industry. Like you are in service of in this case, the client and getting them what they want to do, but also while being sort of assertive and forceful and standing up for what you know about the market. So I think that's like an interesting. I think sometimes you need a lot of recruiters to have one or the other. It's almost like all service, just like tell me what to do, I'll go and do it. And actually, I don't fucking know what to do. Like it's not my world. Or it's much more not understanding actually that there is a customer here, and I am, as the hiring manager, I'm the customer, and we're trying to figure out how to get me what I want.
I had actually a lot of takeaways that I think there's just the whole episode is worth listening. Whether you're an exec search agency or in-house, like that, you could learn a lot from Annie, who is like, by the way, like I think one of the goats in the business. The first one for me is front load the pain. Annie talked about this like daunting intake process that she runs. So she sends somebody like essentially homework before the intake meeting. Then she reads it. Then they have like an hour, 90-minute long intake meeting. And it's a really interesting take because what she's trying to do is to shortcut all of the pain that comes later when you don't do that. Which is like, like we're talking to the wrong flavor of ice cream, or like, I actually like want to go more senior. And when you spend time on the front end to the point of if you saying like a good partner on the search, a good partner on the search will be able to say, actually, no, like this is the profile that you're talking about now, and surfacing the different types of profiles. So when you actually start, you can hire much faster. The second one for me was, everyone talks about candidate experience, and we did have that conversation. I think it's a good conversation. But for me, it's more about building depth and relationships with candidates. I've said this a million times. I think you should play an infinite game, and you will learn that Annie is certainly doing this to the point to where when she rejects candidates who get really late stage, she's giving them feedback. In one case, in the example she gave me in the conversation, she actually like told the person, I think we should have hired you. And I'm sad we didn't, but here's why. Then she had the gall to ask that person for a referral. And that person gave a referral and they hired the referral. And those are the sorts of things that only happen when you're doing the human stuff. And I think sometimes in recruiting, we over-index on the human thing. But this is an example, especially at this level, to where the world is so small that when you do take the time and you really nurture those people and those relationships, you can yield so many things that you're not anticipating.
Everything she described is very true. Like I feel like I have an authentic relationship with her. It's also like a business relationship, but it was never so transparently connected. But also we're both about our business, right? So we know when we're investing in each other, it's potentially to work with each other. It's always part of the equation. Definitely big fan of hers.
She's also a really good texter and text back very quickly.
You're very good at that.
So without further ado, here's my conversation with Annie Wenzel. This is 10x Recruiting, a podcast from MetaView. Let's get after it. Annie, what's up? It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Thanks for inviting me on the pod.
I'm so happy you're here. So I want to jump right into it. And in our prep call, you said something pretty interesting, which you said, closing top candidates is the hardest you've ever seen it. Why is that the case?
I was probably having a rough week. or a month. But I think that closing top candidates is always extremely hard because the best top 10% always have options. But I think in regards to when I said that last time, I think it was, looking back at like the best people know their worth and they've survived multiple layoffs and multiple restructurings and they're reasonably cautious. And so why would they leave a warm, snuggly bed and a solid seat? And they built a world-class team. They've recruited the best people to follow them and they're dedicated to the mission and they're making, 75% plus comp bands. Like why would they move? And I think that's always out there. I also think that candidates have PTSD. If it's 2025, we're coming up on 4 years of like the big push and many saw companies overhire and overpromise and, then they were potentially cut overnight. So it's like, why would I trust a new leadership team? So I think it's just more around like fear and uncertainty.
Totally. Why are they moving then? Like, those are two valid points. I'm seeing the same thing. There's still a lot of these fly-by-night companies that have like huge revenue. But then when you actually talk to the people inside the building, they're saying things like, I think we're just a little bit ahead on the sales cycle. Like sales is ahead of product. I don't know if this thing's actually going to work. So how are the best companies getting people to move?
Well, you see AI companies that might be 100 million in ARR, but their go-to-market team feels very early still, or even their people team. So I think how they get that, every candidate, it's specific, right? So it's like, what was their why? Why did they take my call in the first place? Did we have a relationship? Did we not? And just honing in on that. So I think I'm seeing sign-ons come back, but money isn't everything. So I think it's really like, what is it a culture they want to be a part of? Is it a career path? Are they a step-up candidate? They haven't had this role, this scope, this mandate before. Is it something that feels more stable in their current situation? Is it something that's attached to their purpose? So honestly, it really depends. Like everyone is so different. And I spend a lot of time up front building trust and trying to figure out, why are we chatting? What's your next step? Before I'm vetting them. And so usually I would always go back to that and kind of reiterate that throughout the process.
Say more about the relationship you build with candidates. So I feel like a lot of exec recruiters get a bad rap because they're transactional, right? It's just like, I have a search, I pinged you on LinkedIn, now I'm talking to you, and all I'm trying to do is get a warm butt in this seat so I can move on to the next search. How do you think about that relationship with candidates?
Mm-hmm. Well, I started off in contingency. So I used to be extremely transactional. And over the years, I leveled up and I leveled up. And I realized you're working on higher level positions. It's just a different person in that seat. And these decisions become more and more important and they can't make a mistake anymore. And so I think one of my biggest strength is just building that trust early on. And I do that by being real and being authentic. And I know probably more about the product or the role or the founder than I would say 90% of other recruiters, because I go really, really deep to figure those things out so that I can pitch and vet and make sure that it's a real long lasting fit. So that's probably what I do, but I'm trying to think if I can go any further on that.
That's interesting. So say more about even like the diving in with the company. Andy Price once told me you have to steep with the company in order to make good placements. So how do you do that? Like, how do you get under the hood and assess like the opportunity for candidates?
Yeah. If you don't ask, you're not going to get it. And so I think a lot of folks at maybe other exec search firms are worried about like taking too much of a founder's time. And I'm not. So I'm going to ask more questions than most. I'm going to, I won't take on a search unless I've seen a demo of the product. Because of course, back in the day, you have one client that has a smoke and mirrors product and you never forget that. And so I set the scene up front about this is what I'm looking for. And my expectations of you are going to be very high and your expectations of me should be very high. And so this is what I'm giving and this is what I need to get from you to make this work. And so I just kind of align everything up front, and it doesn't work for all, but it works for most. And I think in the beginning, you've got to go slow before you go fast, and diving into the product and asking the real questions, not just, why is the search open? But it's like, what's the problem? What's broken? What do you really need? Why are you calling me today? And every founder's like, oh, I need this person ASAP yesterday. And it's like, well, then why are you calling me now? And the best answer I've ever gotten was like, we literally just got 55 million in the bank. And so now we can afford you. But besides that, it's like never really been a good answer.
Yeah, I think that's actually like generally a bad answer, right? Like ultimately, you want to be able to place candidates that are at companies for a very long time, such that the candidate thinks about you as like, you know, outside of the person who referred them to their wife or their husband, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, Annie's the one who helped find me this job. So when you say it like at the outset with companies, you have this list of things that like we must agree on together. What are we agreeing on?
I don't know if it's that specific, like we must agree on this particular list, but I kind of walk through my go-to-market process and my expectations, and I see how people respond to that. It's like, hey, our kickoff is going to be an hour. Before we do that kickoff, I'm going to send you a daunting intake, and it's going to take you maybe an hour to 2 hours to fill that out. And I don't even want to schedule a kickoff until you've gotten that back to me within 24 hours, because I want to read it and digest it and come to the call prepared. And so usually when people are like, okay, I can do that, I'll say, and honestly, I want you to do it on like a Saturday morning with a fresh cup of coffee. I don't want you to do it when you're getting 1,000 Slacks. And this is why. And I kind of run through, you know, I want you at your best. I want real answers. I want you to think about these things. And when they understand the why behind it, they're apt to do it. And I've never had a founder or a hiring executive at the end of a search say, oh, that kickoff, or excuse me, that intake process was so daunting or annoying, or I'm so annoyed I spent an hour on a Saturday doing that. They're super happy because we've cut off weeks in the process, and we're going deeper than most. It's not just culture and KPIs and metrics, but it's like, you know, what are your non-negotiables and why? You know, it's like, it just goes really deep on the product and on all of the metrics and on the people that are there, and like why now is the time. And I think when people understand this is going to help me better represent you in market, this is going to help me build trust with candidates because I understand the story behind the story and I understand where maybe the dead bodies are buried, then they jump on board. And then also a lot of times folks will use that, you know, that intake and use it in other searches. And they'll actually be like, hey, we've changed our internal recruiting organization to take some of these things and do them and implement them because we learned so much throughout this process. So I don't know, it's like when you used to online date 15 years ago and people used to have to like fill out all these forms, and it wasn't just like a picture and two things. It was like you went deep, right? You went deep and you made sure that your time was worth it. So that's what I do up front, all time, every time. And I'm also just generally myself, and I usually also send references without people asking. So if they're like, hey, I'm interested in working with you, I'm like, great. If you want references, here's the last two, you know, Series A, fintech or health tech or AI companies that I've worked with before. You know, I'm sure they can tell you about my style and what works. And we're big on data too. So we'll dump them with, this is how long the search took. This is the outcome. This is how many finalists we had. This is what was important. This is what we learned. It's not really to show like we're really fast. It's just to show like these are the things that you can expect from us throughout the process, this level of visibility. And, you know, these are the things that I'm expecting of you, which is to show up on time on calls and to, you know, own your part of the conversation, right? I'm going to do a pitch and sell. And of course, you're going to start with your vision and pitch and sell. But I also need you to kind of focus on X so that the next executive can focus on Y and the same candidate's not getting the same questions over and over and over again. So it's basically, I mean, it's like a team sport.
I mean, for sure. But the thing that I'm learning from this is that you spend so much time in the beginning, which I think also actually improves your credibility with the CEO or the hiring manager. They're like, oh, I've never seen this before. Like this person actually gives a shit, right? And I'm assuming that actually makes things easier when you need to give that person feedback along the way. Is that right?
Yeah. Because I'm like, I care the most. I care a ton about your brand, but I care about my brand more. And so I'm going to make sure that I'm showing up for myself and I'm showing up for you. And I want to answer any question on that first call from a candidate. I want to be able to overcome that objection or just have an answer for them. Like that's my goal, because sometimes the best folks are, you know, giving you a quick call back on their commute home on a Friday and they've got 10 minutes and you have 10 minutes to pitch them and get them hooked to want to go deeper. And if you just know they're Series A, they've raised 50 million, this is their executive team, like everyone can say that. That's boring. You can chat GPT that. But if you can talk about how, oh yeah, I've been to the founders' last 2 Christmas parties and like, this is the vibe. And like, you know, you can tell those real stories of why you're working with them now or why you're working with them again, or people that you placed there in the past, and just, you know, or even just something as simple as why are they better than X? You know, why are they winning? Like that's the kind of stuff that will get you the top 10 percenters that are just like calling you back on a whim because they liked your note or because they've worked with you in the past. So you can't screw up by being extra prepared.
Totally. But then you're in the search, right? And then this is what I find almost with every search I've ever worked on. There's some sort of dissonance between the hiring manager and how they either view the world or how the world views them, right? And you tend to be a mirror. as a great recruiter, you tend to be a mirror to that hiring manager. And so talk to me about like how you actually give that person feedback, how you coach them through things, how you help them see like what the rest of the world is seeing.
I ask a lot of those questions up front, which I'm like, what would your current and past team say about you? Like what's your management leadership style? So I get in those deep questions as part of that like pre-kickoff process. So they're kind of used to that questioning. And I also explain like, I need to humanize you for candidates because 50% of someone's going to take this job or any job is going to be who they report to and kind of that relationship and vibe. And so I'm trying to think how I give feedback is usually like, pretty direct and in pretty much real time. So they know to trust it. It depends. I also try to meet clients where they're at. So I have certain clients that they want to meet every week for 30 minutes, and that's maybe all they can give me. Most of my clients are slacking with me multiple times a day. Maybe they're calling me 10 minutes at the end of the day or every other day, and they want to stay really close. And so I try to figure out like, what's your best cadence and communication style? What's going to work best? Because I'm adaptable, but sometimes my clients are traveling 40% of the time. They've got, for this quarter, they have 25 direct reports and they're totally swamped. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, once again, it goes back to the alignment up front of this is what I need from you. This is what, tell me what you need from me, and then kind of staying close to that bar. And then if something comes up where it's like I have to give feedback, I just let them know. I'm like, hey, let's chat either on the weekly or let's chat in real time if it's something super important. And it really lands well. I can't think of times where I had to give feedback or, pretty rarely over even the 13 years I've been at Swing that it's been rough. Like feedback isn't usually an issue. Because I train my clients up front to kind of know this is your part in the process. This is what candidates expect. This is what you should expect. I don't know if like giving client feedback's ever really like a tough thing for me.
Well, you're probably just serving as like, you're just serving as a voice of what the market is telling you, right? And that way with data, it's very easy to present to somebody. But I'm finding with some of these like newer first time founders that are just like in absolute grind mode, they think that their thing is the best thing on planet Earth.
Yeah,
right.
their baby.
Somebody said it to me today. They said, yeah, they're a little high on their own supply. And so like, how do you how do you coach them through that? Like, that's tough.
It's just like, it's not just like the data or trends or themes or like how they're showing up as an interviewee, but also, hey, by the way, this person's not interested and this is why. And this is how we might kind of change. Okay. I'm huge on data. So, and I am extremely thorough. So usually if I'm not coming to them the first time someone says no, or I'm not interested in this or why, I usually try to get a couple of data points together, and they should expect to see that from me kind of on a weekly basis. And so I'm trying to think of maybe like a specific example of when I had to give feedback. I was working with a vertical SaaS company, Series A. And before we kicked off the search, it was actually a search that I didn't think I was going to take. Mission driven. I don't want to say what vertical because I know exactly what I'm talking about, but it's a very polarizing vertical that people either love or hate. But they came to me, and I'm a first generation college student. I had worked in admissions in the past, and so there was a lot of things that drew me to it. And I basically kind of politely was like, no, I don't think this is the right search, and this is why. And the founder listened to me, and he came back, and he kind of overcame my objections, and was like, you just need to see our demo, you just need to mess with the product. And as soon as I messed with the product, I was like, he was right. Like, I can sell this now because the product's doing everything that it says it can and more. It's going deep. And so I ended up taking on the search, and, in 45 days, we're extending an offer. So I think, every situation is just so different. And I think giving feedback with that in that situation was just like very direct. And I found out later, they're like, we are nerdy, we're direct, we're super thorough, and we're used to folks telling us like, no. And so it wasn't something new for them, even though they're first time founders, even though they're early stage. And I usually try to suss out like the jerks or the assholes up front. So if I'm getting vibes that like they're going to be extremely difficult, or they think that they've got the smartest baby in the world, then I usually try to, not take on those searches.
Yeah, it's nice to have the selection ability at the top versus like taking everything and then you end up with like one of these psycho founders. But it's actually, for recruiters listening on this pod right now, it's actually good to do in your interview process, right? When you're interviewing with companies, similar to what Annie is saying, it's important to just kind of like figure out these things before you go take this job, and you have to sell it as part of like your day to day, because Annie just has to place one candidate.
Yeah. No, I'll back channel founders before I take on a search. and kind of, figure out the vibe, because that saved me some time. And don't get me wrong, like I can work with personalities of all types. Like I can work with very direct people. I can work with very data forward people. I can work with very opinionated people, but they have to understand like, here's the world and here's kind of how you fit in and here's what you can get. I think what I really struggle with is when you like, it's not even a first time founder, it could be a third time founder. It doesn't matter. But like, I always give it like, they think like they're going to get this 3-time 0 to 100 or whatever they need, 100 to 500. And then that person's going to come back and be like their frontline manager. And you're like, that is not something that's going to happen. And so I kind of suss out, like, are they realistic up front? And a big part of that is like doing kind of an early calibration and seeing how folks respond to that, because you just learn so much in a calibration. Unfortunately, usually the calibration is happening after the agreement is signed, so you don't always catch it. But I've been doing this long enough and I ask more questions than most, and I do everything via Zoom Live. And so I can kind of get that real time feedback. But yeah.
Totally. So talk to me about the exec search market right now. So a couple things I'm seeing is it feels like hotter than 2021, which I never thought I would say in the depths of 2022. It also feels like the types of AI companies we have right now that are really prominent in the market are looking for a specific kind of, call it like hardcore type of candidate that I just don't know how big of a supply of those people that we have. What are you seeing?
I mean, it's like the infamous player coach is back, right? Where it's like, no matter how big the company is, like, we're still very hands-on and you have to execute on your own. And I think that's fine. I think anyone in like a pre-IPO company is going to have to execute. But I think there's this push for, they've maybe like redesigned their org chart or even their go-to-market motion. And they're like looking for this Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's like, hey, they've got to have the top-down technical and the bottoms-up PLG. And ideally, they've sold to developers. And also like, they really understand like, mid-funnel drop-off. So it's like, okay, it's like when you think of marketing, it's like, okay, I want the CMO or the VP of marketing that, is super analytical and growth mindset, but also a great storyteller, like a product marketer, and then also like maybe minors in brand and comms. And you're like, well, that person is probably not available to anyone because that person doesn't exist. And so that's when you kind of have to go into like, what's broken? What do you need? Like, what does success look like in 12 months, and ask those deeper questions. And then you can kind of tee out a couple of archetypes that will work, and you can explain back like, okay, this is your problem. This is how we're going to solve it, as opposed to just like, there's one person that's going to be your Obi-Wan Kenobi that's going to like solve all the problems in your company, because that person is going to have way too much pressure on their back. And let's be realistic, like in 12 to 18 months, like they're not going to be able to solve all those problems.
Totally. And it feels like the last era of tech companies was really successful, right? Like a lot of people saw exits and liquidity. And it feels like a lot of those people have graduated to, as another friend said, work heaven, to where they want to work like 20 hours a week, right? But they're not going to do the 996. How are you feeling about just the general supply of candidates that are up for this like new era, this new hardcore era of tech?
The 996. Gosh, that's so brutal. I don't know many people that want to work 9 to 9, 6 days a week. I mean, I can't, like maybe a couple, right?
I think it's more of just like a saying of like, we work a lot here.
But
yeah.
Still, even if it's not 996, it's like more of like, it's the 5 days in office is back, right? Or just understanding the company's expectations up front. There's a lot of founders that are like, we are here. We all do dinner together every night. I mean, if you want someone to work that hard, they have to be super bullish on your mission and vision and product and people. It's not just like one thing. So, I mean, I don't think there's ever like a large supply of those types of folks. I think for most roles, there's probably, depending on how unique the role is, like 6 to 8 candidates that are really spot on. And then everything else is like, hey, what about this caveat? Can you live with this? Can you deal with this? And like once you get past 10 to 14, you're just like really shooting a dart, So I don't think there's a ton of people that want to do that anymore. They've made their money. They're living their life. They're in their 40s. They have their kids. They're in private school. They want to spend time with their kids again. You have to find the high slopers that haven't had that success yet and are willing to grind to get there. Like, you're not going to get someone that's done it over and over again to come do it again.
I love that. So Henry at Carta used to say, you can either hire for trajectory or you can hire for experience.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying is that actually like these trajectory people are probably better off in the early stage. That's also what I believe. How do you find them and how do you vet them?
How do I find them? I'm blessed to have been in the same role for a very long time. So I have a great network. And then I have a bunch of wonderful friends that decided to get out of the agency world and go to VCs. And so I always kind of start off with, here's my network, and I kind of blast it out to my solid few. Like, am I thinking about this the right way? What thoughts and opinions? Have you done any searches that are similar? And then, I'm not going to lie, Swing has a pretty world-class research team. And so in the beginning, it's like, what do they need to have? What are the non-negotiables? And then we're kind of search scientists. Like, we have a little bit of research brains. So it's like, okay, what companies have done that? At what stage? What was the culture of the ICP that they hired for? It's not, to be honest, like, it's not rocket science. It's a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of like using every channel. Like sometimes depending on the search, I'm like, oh, Series A, FinTech, X to Y, Z, I can think of, 3 to 5 people off the top of my head. And then sometimes I'm like, like, there's no one perfect that I'm thinking of. Even though I've won the search, we've gone through the cycle, I'm like, I'm going to need to like do some research and really like figure it out and use all of my friends and all of my mentors to find that type of prototype, and then in the beginning, you just test out early on, like, what archetype works, right? Because usually it's like, okay, here's the perfect person, here's the North Star, here's who we've scorecarded against. But usually within the first 10 days, it's like, okay, this person doesn't exist, or they do, and here they are, and you just run through it.
And you're just presenting when you present to the hiring manager, I'm assuming you're just showing like, here's the data. Like actually take a step back and tell me about the research team. Because like, I think this is sometimes with search firms, the thing that goes under discussed when hiring managers or CEOs are looking to work with a search firm. And I think this is maybe like outside of the partner who's doing the calls and building their relationships and their network, of course. But the research team is so critical, right? Of like, they're putting together the market map. They're showing you what's out there. They're making sure that like we're basing this search in reality on what exists in the world. How do they, like, what do their outputs look like, Annie?
Yeah. So, I should probably walk you through kind of like more in detail, like our process from beginning to end, but like okay. So I kind of talked about, how we kick off, right? So it's like, we dig deep. It's not just the job description. It's why the role exists. It's why now, it's the history. It's like what success looks like in 3, 6, 12, 18 months, like what's broken, what are they going to walk into? If they can answer these questions up front, usually my conversion rates are higher. Like, I can build trust quicker. So the kickoff process is just like a deep back and forth dive. You're catching things, maybe some green flags are coming up, maybe some yellow flags. And then we're basically going to go and we're going to do the calibration. And that's where we're going to talk through the scorecard. And the researcher is deeply involved in this. So like, after we do the kickoff and we figure out like, what are the must-haves, what are the nice-to-haves, what are like, you got to go 10 to 50, you've got to, market or sell to this ICP, you've got to open up these global offices, whatever it is, we basically will come up with a rubric, which it's funny. Like, I remember when rubrics maybe like 5 years ago started to become a real big thing. I thought they were so annoying. I was like, we're over engineering every hire. And now I'm not going to lie. Like, I love a good scorecard. Like, it helps focus me, and it helps like focus my team, and it helps focus the founder of, okay, these are the things we aligned on. These are the things you said you needed and wanted, and where you had flexibility, like, here's the market that can do that. And so basically what our research team does with us is, we're coming up with the strategy, and we're coming up with some early example profiles and some actual organizations that have had successful wins at whatever stage. And our research team is taking those 2 archetypes, or those, 2 or 3 people, and turning that into 30, right? Depending on the search, that number can be larger, it can be less. And so they're not only market mapping, but they're like talent mapping. So it's like, okay, here's the companies that have done X, what the founder wants, and they've either sold or marketed to this buyer, they have the same, sales motion, whatever it may be. And then here's the folks within each one of those companies that did it at that time, right? Or they were the number 2 at that time. So like, they learned from somebody great. And so and then it's like, okay, great, find more of those, right? And it depends. Like, is it an SF search? Is it a New York search? Is it national? So they're behind the scenes, like going through the interwebs and figuring out like, okay, so our target list is really 117 companies. Outside of that, we're making major trade-offs. And so they're finding those folks and, serving those folks up to me. And then me and my team are actively reaching out and engaging them. But depending on the search, it's like 1 to 3 strategies. So we show not only the example companies, but we're showing the people within those companies. And then we're setting up the Slack. We're having our weekly meeting, whatever cadence the client wants. And then after we've calibrated the next 10 days that we're in market, I usually tell people like it might be kind of quiet, but that's usually because I want to under promise and over deliver. Usually I'm already thinking of a couple folks and I have a couple calls set up and we're calibrating early on the right people. Something that I don't do that I see other firms doing is they'll show people that they kind of know are not going to accept the job or are too good. And they'll be like, here's Bob and Marty and Jill, and talk to them. And they have relationships with these folks, and these folks will meet with them and interview, do one call with the founder, and then basically say like, no, this is why I'm not interested. I don't like to do that at all. I don't like to ask favors, and I don't like to waste time with anyone that I know I'm not going to be able to close. And so what I'm really good at is saying, okay, here's the folks that have what you need and want and why I think they would be interested or would engage with you, and just suss that out up front. And then we're kind of running through that live, and then they're meeting those folks and kind of taking it from there.
What I'm hearing from you is that this is not like we're talking to 100 people on a search.
Honestly, I think if a search takes longer than 90 days, something's broken majorly. And if you're talking to 100 people, like there's a lot of things that are wrong. Were you not aligned with the founder or the hiring exec up front? Is this, I hate to say, like a unicorn profile that doesn't exist? Because within 30 people, you're going to know if this is a profile that exists and who are the best at it. So yeah, I get nervous and it does happen. There are times where we'll have a search where we're talking to 50 plus people. It's not every time, but I think that's usually when a founder or a hiring exec was like, oh, a board member told me I needed this, but there's no real pain and nothing's really broken. And so they're like figuring out what they want by meeting a bunch of people, but they don't have any pain behind it. So they're actually not really ready to hire.
Makes total sense. Yeah, it does seem like some of these founders of today's era want just like quantity. And I'm assuming you're going to have to like coach them into that's not what exec search is. Like we don't do quantity. We do quality and of the highest quality. And it's like, this is the list of the world of people we want to go after. And so we're going to do everything we can to turn those stones and get those people to talk to us, as opposed to just like running through and sending shitty LinkedIn messages and actually like just playing the volume game.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'll never talk someone into like making a hire that they're not ready to make. Like it's always your decision at the end of the day, but there's just no use of wasting that much of a founder's time anyways, and it's like, I will get founders that on my weekly are like, well, who did you DQ and why? And they're like, well, maybe. And I'm like, okay, let's go back to what we aligned on with like what's a must have and what's nice to have and who's going to really move the needle and who's going to, by the way, these are what the back channel said. So every once in a while I will get someone that's like, I want to talk to 15 people. And you're like, okay, if that's what you want, I'll give you the 15 best. But usually like you should have a search done with 10% of candidates or less.
I agree. I love that.
If you're aligned.
If you're, which is, it definitely seems that that's what your magic is. And that's what I'm learning from you. Last topic I want to talk to you about is it's kind of like overblown and been talked about a million times in a super fluffy way, which is like candidate experience. And I vomit every time I hear that term. But I do think companies are exiting an era to where they were used to treating candidates like shit.
Mm-hmm.
And, just because the market was what it was, right? It was like, we have a job. So, we are the keeper of this job. There aren't many of them. And so we don't care about you. Do you think candidate experience matters?
Hugely. Like, I don't barf when I hear about candidate experience. I would completely disagree with you. I'm like, candidate experience is not a nice to have. It's a non-negotiable. It's like, it's brand equity. I hear horror stories from candidates from cycles that they've been through where, it could be anything from somebody didn't get back to them, post a presentation, or they made them do an extra presentation, or the CEO's girlfriend showed up at the final because she's a marketer and they needed help, assessing talent. And I just think
what?
Yeah, I think a botched process spreads faster than a great one. And so it's like every candidate is a potential customer, is a potential future partner, or even a future hire. And so you have to treat everyone with respect. It's like, I just think about like, okay, the best interview processes I've ever been through and the worst, like what comes to mind first. And it's like the worst, it's like the horror stories or the feeling that you felt when you left. It's like people are going to remember that. They're going to remember if they felt like their time, if someone shows up, like with founders, like I'm big on showing up on time. It's like the one thing you can control, right? Or it's like if and when you're not going to show up under 5% of the time, which is like the bar that I try to hold my founders to, like, let me know, let the candidate know, like, hey, this call's running late. I'm going to be a couple minutes late. Like those little things are huge. And so I think like in a small ecosystem, word travels fast and like you can't afford to burn good candidates because some of the hardest searches I've ever done in my life, I worked with a big AI company. You definitely know them. I hired basically their like head of federal, head of PubSec. And it was such a wild search. It was a search that they needed, it was basically a GM search, but it was really like a CEO of their federal business. And so they needed to be great in sales, but they needed to also own operations. They needed to understand product. And it was such a unique search. And I remember we got down to a few finalists and this one gentleman was like Teresa, is it Carlson? The woman who started Fed at Amazon. I'm blanking, but it was like her right arm. And he was amazing. And he didn't get the job, which is just crazy. It's a story for another day. But I was like, who the hell do you know that's better than you because you're the best that I've talked to? And he was like, honestly, it's X. And you should call him because you would have never reached out to him. His profile does not make sense, but he's better than me. He's amazing. That's the guy who got the job. And he was right. I never would have reached out to him in a million years. His profile on paper didn't make sense. And he was better than the right arm of the woman at Amazon that built Fed. So if he didn't have a great experience and, he probably wouldn't have given me that, right? I just had to DQ him when he was excellent, right? Tell him he didn't get the job when he probably should have because he was amazing, but you can't control everything.
It's such a great story for the infinite game, right? Like I truly believe like in recruiting, we are playing this infinite game and the world wants to push us into the transactional mode, right? Because we just have so much shit to do, right? Everyone's calendar is packed, our to-do lists are packed, our inboxes are full. And so it's just, you want to just like, okay, goodbye. Like I'm done with this. But like taking the extra 5 minutes and you asking like, who else should I reach out to? And did you do that when you rejected him?
Yeah, I did when I rejected him and he gave me him right there. Yeah. I mean, I think he also, once again, like building that authenticity and trust, I think he knew I was gutted. I was like, I don't necessarily agree with this decision because you are the best person. And then I give data because I want people to understand, like, here's where we're looking, here's what we've seen, this is why you match up. But here's, and I like to give candidates actual feedback, maybe not verbatim what the client says, obviously, because I have to manage that relationship, but I want to give them something that they can work with and grow from. And they appreciate it so much because they're so used to being like, you did not get the job. Let's stay in touch. Bye. It's like, no, give them the real, and it'll come back to you tenfold. And of course, like I don't have 5 minutes to DQ everyone every time. But I think in this case, it was really worth it. And it's also managing your candidates' expectations because, sometimes you have those candidates that are super needy and they want, they want prep, they want debrief, they want to talk almost every day. And that's okay. Like I will meet people where they're at. And if they're a finalist, I'm going to stay close to them. But sometimes you have to let them know like, hey, this client, we talk once a week for 30 minutes and we go through everything once a week. So like, if you don't hear from me for a few days, it's not because I'm ghosting you. It's because we're running a very efficient strategic process and that's how this works. And so like you'll hear from me on Wednesdays, every Wednesday. And if I get anything before then, like that's amazing because it's not usually happening. And then they can expect to like not have every 48-hour touch point. But if you don't tell them that, then they're going to think like, you're not as interested.
Yeah, setting expectations is huge. The other thing I think a lot about in recruiting is the no update. So if I told you I'm going to get back to you on Tuesday and it's Tuesday and I don't have a fucking update, totally. Just tell somebody I don't have an update and this is when I expect to have it. And it's just like the human stuff is so underrated.
Yeah. Well, it's like treating people how you want to be treated. And I think when you're busy, some of those things fall to the wayside. Even some like the recruiter 101 things that like I used to preach. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not asking this question that I used to ask for the first 5 years of being a recruiter. And one of my good girlfriends and fellow partner at Swing, Kim, the other day was like, I always ask everyone, like on any call, doesn't matter what the level of the role is, like, give me your 2-minute career bio. And she time blocks them. And you just learn so much in those 2 minutes that you can take. And after those 2 minutes are over, if they're probably the right one. It was just like such a basic question that I had kind of fall off on. And I was like, oh, I need to bring this back into the fold. Like this is going to save me so much time. So,
yep.
You can't be everything to everyone, but you can be a respectful human being and you can build a great network and make more hires by doing so.
The bar is not super high. It's just really not. Annie, this was amazing. Where can people find you?
They can find me at Annie@swingsearch.com.
Thank you so much for the time, Annie.
Thank you.